Hello and welcome to your favorite channel Web Stories, where we've begun a series of even more true and real incidents that have occurred and stunned the world. Every day, we will offer you fantastic, terrifying and shocking stories, the majority of which will be based on genuine events. Consider this for a moment. What fascinates you about genuine crime? Is it the goal of a homicide or a disappearance to figure out why people do such horrible things? The horrible and terrible situation we're discussing today is so bizarre that we'll be thinking about these questions for years. This is the case of Lori Vallee and Chad Daybell, two people who caused so much mayhem in such a short space of time that they will for sure go down in the history books. This case is still ongoing, and it seems like every time there's an update, this story just gets crazier. Let's get started. Lori Vallee and Chad Daybell married on November 5th, 2019 on the island of Hawaii, while a team of investigators looked into many fatalities linked to the pair, as well as the disappearance of Lori's son and daughter. To understand the story completely, we have to go back to 1992, when a 19-year-old Lori married the first of her 5 husbands. Lori's high school boyfriend was Nelson Yanes, and while the two appeared to be in love, their marriage only lasted a few months before ending in divorce. She married William Laglio in Texas in 1995, a long way from her home in San Bernardino, California. They had a son named Colby together, but their marriage ended in 1998. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan Jr., who legally adopted Colby and helped to raise him as his own son. A year later, the couple welcomed their first child, a girl called Tiley, but the marriage did not last. Lori and Joseph divorced in 2005, and Joseph continued to contact Lori on a daily basis in order to see Colby and Tiley. However, in 2007, Joseph got in an incident with Lori's brother Alex. Alex advised him to leave him alone and beat him up. Alex was sentenced to 90 days in prison for this, but it wasn't the first time he'd allegedly sprung to his sister's defense in a violent manner. Joseph died of a heart attack in 2018, and his death is being examined for reasons that will be revealed later. Lori married Charles in 2006. This would be her longest-lasting marriage, but maybe the most destructive of all her life. Lori was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when she died. After they married, Charles changed to Lori's beliefs after spending his entire life as a Catholic. He shared his home with Lori, Colby and Tiley, as well as 2 boys from a previous marriage. Charles's grandnephew JJ was given to them when he was just a few months old and would later be diagnosed with special needs. Their big blended family moved out of Hawaii. Yes, the same place she later married Chad for a couple of years before relocating to Arizona in 2016, where things began to fall apart. Lori discovered some novels by a fellow member of her church. It was Chad Daybell who wrote books about the end of times, telling the story of a group of LDS followers who go on a journey to rid the US of wickedness. After moving to Arizona, Lori got enamored with his novels. She and a friend went to an open gathering geared toward preparing people for Jesus' so-called second coming. Lori and Chad met for the first time in this location. Lori got super involved with preparing and people attending their events, and even becoming a co-host of the podcast they ran, which Chad often appeared in. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. Lori had developed some radical opinions that Charles didn't agree with, and their relationship began to show fractures. Lori claimed to have had near-death experiences and spiritual visions because she believed she was a reincarnated God whose duty on earth was to prepare for Jesus' return. According to Lori's beliefs, Charles was a zombie, which meant that his spirit was no longer in his body, was stuck in a limbo while attempting to return home, and could only be freed by the death of his physical body. The couple separated, and Charles filed for divorce, saying that he didn't feel safe around Lori because of her constant threats against him. Then on July 11th, 2019, Charles went to the house to pick up JJ for school. He didn't leave the home alive. Charles got into an argument with Lori and her brother Alex, during which he picked up a baseball bat that belonged to Tiley, according to Lori and her brother Alex. Lori, Tiley and JJ escaped while Alex tried to calm things down. He claimed Charles had assaulted him with a bat and that in self-defense he fired a revolver at him, killing him almost instantly. Lori didn't hang around to see if the cops arrived. She dropped the kids off at school after taking them to Burger King for breakfast. Despite the fact that Alex was not detained, the detectives on the scene recall thinking the situation was strange. The case is still open today. After 2 months, Lori relocated to Idaho, with JJ and Alex a few miles from her new house. Chad shared an apartment with his wife Tammy and their 5 children. They had been married for nearly 20 years when Lori arrived in town, yet everything changed. On October 9th, 2019, Tammy shared a frightening experience she had at her house on Facebook. A man in a ski mask appeared out of nowhere near the back of her automobile with a paintball gun. He shot at her several times, but it wasn't loaded. 10 days later, Tammy suddenly died of natural causes in her sleep. Chad denied Tammy's request for an autopsy and instead received nearly $400,000 from her life insurance policy. Chad and Lori married after some time, and things went from bad to worse. Some of Lori's relatives claimed they hadn't seen Tiley or JJ in weeks and were unaware that the wedding was taking place. Lori had been telling Tiley and JJ a lot of strange stories. She informed friends that Tiley had died a long time ago and that JJ had moved in with relatives in another state. Their extended family discovered they hadn't seen them in a long time and that they weren't with Lori and Chad in Hawaii. They got worried. Chad and Lori returned to Idaho a couple of weeks later, and the police were called to perform a wellness check on Tiley and JJ. Outside of town, police spoke with Alex Cox and Chad Daybell. Despite the fact that he had just married Lori, Daybell acted as if he didn't know her. According to authorities, Alex assured the authorities that JJ was safe and well in Louisiana with his grandparents. His grandparents, on the other hand, were the ones who contacted the cops. Lori then told the cops that JJ was living with a friend out of state. Her phone records shows that she called a friend and asked her to corroborate her claims to the police, but she declined to do so. Lori was given a deadline to show proof that JJ and Tiley were safe or face the repercussions. Rather than doing so, she and Chad returned to Hawaii. Concerns escalated when Lori revealed that he had put all of his belongings into a storage container. The case drew a lot of attention from the media as it evolved, and then they would track them down and ask questions. On December 9th, 2019, Tammy's remains were exhumed as investigators uncovered something alarming. Lori used Charles's Amazon account to purchase 2 wedding rings a few weeks before Tammy died, indicating to authorities that Lori and Chad were intending to be married before Tammy died. There was enough evidence to suggest her death wasn't natural at all. An autopsy was performed and she was reburied the same day. Her autopsy results were sent to Idaho investigators in February, but nothing has been revealed by the police. Lori's brother Alex died the very next day following the autopsy. He and his girlfriend Zaluma Pestinez had just married in Las Vegas 2 weeks before. Alex adopted Zaluma's surname and moved in with her, concealing their weddings. He passed away in the hospital after collapsing in his bathroom early in the morning. He died of natural causes, according to a medical examiner, and while he had an autopsy, he was also cremated. Many people are dubious of the circumstances surrounding Alex's death, especially when the police failed to establish to the courts that Tiley and JJ were safe. Lori was captured in Hawaii on February 20th, 2020, and extradited to Idaho, where she was charged with 2 felony counts of child desertion, and her bail was set at $5 million. She pled not guilty and her bond was reduced to $1 million long after she returned to Idaho. Following Alex Cox's death in June 2020, the police constructed a forensic test on his phone. Tiley and JJ are believed to have vanished in September 2019, while Alex spent time in an isolated place of Chad's land. A search of the area was carried out and the bones of Tiley and JJ were discovered there. They were buried in shallow graves with pebbles and wooden planks covering them. Chad was immediately arrested and charged with concealment of evidence. He pleaded not guilty and he and Lori had to sit in jail and wait for their trials. Because many court proceedings were postponed owing to the pandemic, Lori and Chad were charged on May 26, 2021 with the homicides of Tiley and Chad, the homicide of his ex-wife Tammy, implying that there may have been some damning evidence in that autopsy. There's no indication yet on whether Lori will face charges in connection with Charles's death or Alex's, but people speculate that he participated in the killings of Tiley and JJ and he was killed to keep him quiet. Because he was cremated, there was no way to perform a second autopsy unless there is other evidence in his first autopsy. We may never know what happened to Alex, but we do know what happened to Tiley and JJ has destroyed the rest of Lori's family. It's very unjust that they've become entangled in all of this, but now that Lori and Chad have been arrested, hope they'll be able to get justice. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section.